Welcome to the Total Soccer Show and the latest edition of USMNT Weekly. On this episode, we're explaining why you need to keep a close eye on Serginho Dest this season. Yes, you. We've got some big transfer updates and we'll field a few of your listener questions too. My name's Ryan Bailey. Joining me, a USMNT Weekly power trio. Joe Lowry's here. Hello, Joe.
Hey, Ryan. How are you? How is your not vacation? Because you're here with us. How are things?
I do this all the time, where I take a family vacation and podcast through it. It's a very popular choice that I make, Joe. Yes. Very
podcasting through vacations, I think, is how vacations were meant to be taken, right? Like, that's just as a society, we've all agreed on that with the rise of podcasts. I think they have to go together.
Yeah, I mean, here at TSS Enterprises, if we want to go from the millions of dollars we make now to the hundreds of millions that we aspire to make, we just got to plow through. That's it.
Sacrifices have to be made.
That's just the mindset.
Yeah.
Graham Mothen's here. Hello, Graham. How are you?
Hello, Ryan Bailey. I am well. I am not podcasting on vacation, which I could have done this week. My family are away in Spain and I've been left at home. I just don't know how you do that. Like, I would be up to my eyeballs in Serginho Dest Dutch Super Cup tape in preparation for episodes, and I don't know if that would fly with the rest of my family. So I get left behind to indulge those urges. So
is that a Graham Ruthven choice? Is it I'd rather stay behind and get my podcasting done?
I mean, I will always choose grinding Serginho Dest Dutch Super Cup tape over lounging in the sunshine in the south of Spain.
Thank you for finishing and adding Dutch Super Cup tape to the sentence that you were on. I don't know if it was just my recording, but there was a pause there in an uncomfortable place, and I'm glad we moved past it.
Well, okay. Do that as well. That's for the Patreon.
All right, speaking thereof, Graham, patreon.com/Total Soccer Show is the best way to support this here endeavour. We've got bonus episodes, bonus video, and access to our Discord, where, among other things, we have an AMA channel. You can ask us anything. Hey, maybe on a bonus episode or two this week we'll answer some of those. What say you, Graham? Yeah, should we do that?
What an idea. We should do that. Did you just come up with that on the fly?
All by myself. No premeditation at all in that decision. Patreon.com/Total Soccer Show is where you go for that, please, and thank you. Best way to support us, etc. and so on. Let's get to USMNT Weekly, shall we? We'll start off, Joe, with a section we're calling USMNT players we're interested in watching in Europe this season. Shall we start proceedings?
Rolls off the tongue.
I know. It's quite ingenious. Joe, why don't we start with Serginho Dest? Obviously, his name's come up already. Scored the winner in the Dutch Super Cup, which we haven't kept our eyes off over the past few days. It's a good injury-free run for Dest coming up. Good things are on the way, right?
It's weird. I'm in this spot. I do think good things are on the way. Graham's crossing his fingers, which feels appropriate for this injury-prone player pool. I don't know if anybody else is having this experience, but you guys were messaging in the Slack the other day about Wimbledon's opener this year and that being like a real soccer game. And I know the second Bundesliga started already. We had this shield over in the Netherlands. It's weird that we've gone from the friendlies that I think I can just sort of ignore to games that actually do sort of kind of count. And the Netherlands one less so, but those other ones certainly do. I'm still kind of trying to transition my own brain into, this is it. Like, this is the season. It's back. It's already here. Maybe the Premier League previews next week will help me with that. But Serginho Dest is the player probably of all of the European USMNT contingent that I'm most interested in watching this year. And Graham took time to build a great doc for this show and put Serginho Dest in the section before I did. Ryan still come to me first. I'm his favorite. That we can be absolutely convinced of. Dest is the one I'm most interested in because of three things. First, he is just almost objectively the most fun player in the pool. Like, for various reasons. For the off-field, baguette-loving reasons and the knockoff Chicago Bulls jersey reasons. For the fact that he is incredibly dynamic and entertaining to watch on the field as well. So watching Serginho Dest is fun. Like, if I could wholeheartedly recommend watching a U.S. player to anybody, any soccer fan, he would be my number one pick. Number two, for why Serginho Dest is worth watching this year especially, we barely saw him last year. And we haven't seen Serginho Dest play because of how much he spent out injured last season. We didn't see him over the summer either, and that leads me into my third point. He's still yet to play for Mauricio Pochettino. There is really no player that I'm as intrigued about seeing with the U.S. that we haven't seen with the U.S. under this new era as Serginho Dest. We have seen Pochettino, I think, establish a setup that could fit Dest quite well towards the latter stages of this summer's Gold Cup, where he moved Alex Freeman out from being that deep-lying right back to being a more aggressive overlapping presence. that role feels much more suited to Dest than some of the other ways that we've seen Pochettino use that right back spot. But we still haven't actually seen it for Sergiño Dest. So there's all sorts of things that I've been missing about Dest. He's got off to a great start this season with that goal he scored in the Shield. It is a very Sergiño Dest goal where he's carrying the ball forward out of midfield, passes it, then kind of drives into the half space off the ball, moves into the box and scores with his weak foot. Like it checks a lot of boxes for a Sergiño Dest goal, and I want more of that.
Yeah, it's been such a long time since Dest was last playing regular football that I'm just looking forward to seeing him back on a pitch again. And I do think there is a risk of Dest's value to the USMNT growing exponentially when he's been unavailable. Like I do want to temper expectations a little bit. He's not going to come into this team and everything's going to be perfect, and the US looks like a team that can make a deep run at the World Cup all of a sudden. But I agree with everything that Joe said about Dest. When you compare him to the other right back options that the US have, he's on another level, both in terms of just his actual level. Like Alex Freeman has potential. You could say in an attacking sense there's overlap between him and Sergiño Dest, but clearly Dest is just at a higher level. And then you compare him to Joe Scally, and the profiles of those two players are just completely different. And for PSV, he's been out for such a long time. That goal in the Super Cup, which I believe that competition is called the Johan Cruyff Shield, which I enjoy very much. It was against Go Ahead Eagles. By the way, they did go ahead in that game. They were true to their name, and PSV fought back to win that 2-1. And it's a great goal by Dest with his weak foot. He it's like the sort of drilled finish into the far corner. So his technical ability is off the scale. And I was reading a Voetbal.nl article.
Yeah, you were.
I believe via Google Translate. My Dutch isn't quite up to standard. That site is, I believe, one of the most popular kind of football sites in the Netherlands. And this article was talking about what we were talking about in Monday's trophy draft, which is that PSV have lost a lot of important players over the summer. Malik Tillman, of course. Luke de Jong has finally been banished by Peter Bosz, which is good news for Ricardo Pepi. Maybe a little bit more on that later on. Johan Bakayoko has left. Noah Lang has left. So this article was highlighting some of the other players that are going to need to step up. And Sergiño Dest was one of the players near the top of the list that they highlighted. And obviously, he's not an out-and-out attacker. I am not counting on him to produce goals like the one he scored at the weekend on a game-to-game basis. But nonetheless, he can have an impact on the final third. In that game against Go Ahead Eagles, PSV had loads of the ball. I think like 70, from memory, like 72% or something like that. So Dest was really high and advanced, and he was seeing a lot of the ball. And it was just encouraging to see him play that role for a team again. And I'm just generally a fan of Sergiño Dest, even going back to his Barcelona days where I watched him in pretty much every game he played at that time. And I think he's made some bad career choices. I still wonder how a move to Bayern Munich pans out for him over Barcelona at that time. He's obviously had some bad injury misfortune. But there is a quality player in there, and I've got my fingers crossed quite literally earlier in the show that he can get a lot of minutes this season and he can be prepared well for that World Cup next year.
Graham, Pepi and Dest, are they the USMNT players who are most likely to win domestic silverware this season? And that's a question from someone who's not got a vested interest in PSV doing very well in the TSS European Club Soccer Trophy Draft.
I mean, potentially you're kind of putting me on the spot there a little bit. I can't think of anyone that jumps out
Feels
that
right
would
to
be
me.
ahead of them. Unless I'm forgetting someone obvious. But yeah, for Ricardo Pepi, as I mentioned, Luke de Jong Peter Bosz finally has no choice but to start someone else at centre forward. Alisson Play started against Go Ahead Eagles. He's coming from Gladbach over the summer. He's 32. Play a few seasons ago was quite a valuable attacker. So maybe I am jumping to conclusions here and Peter Bosz is going to put me in my place. But Pepi will surely have a good run of games to make that position his own this season. So for Dest and Pepi, there's a very strong chance that they're going to be influential figures in the Eredivisie this season.
Yeah, and Pepi is another guy that is absolutely worth watching. We have seen very little of him under Mauricio Pochettino, and he's got a big opportunity. Graham, you've outlined it well. He comes off the bench, Pepi, in that game that we're talking about, but he was, as far as I can understand it, on a minutes restriction because he has still been recovering from that long-term injury that he suffered last year and that saw him miss the whole summer. So he is, by all accounts, working his way back into being able to play a full 90-minute match. And when that happens, although I do think Playa can add something to this team, it's got to be Ricardo Pepi's job, right? I mean, still at their core, PSV are really two things as a club. Number one, they are a giant in the Netherlands who want to compete for titles and can and do that on a regular basis. And number two, they're a club that makes a lot of money off of transfer fees. Like they are not in the business of letting a highly valuable, young, early 20s striker rot on their bench when they know, and I know that they have had legitimate conversations with Premier League clubs about, hey, are you guys going to take Pepi and give us a big bag of cash or not, right? So PSV are very much in the business of playing players like Ricardo Pepi and will play Pepi, I think, a lot this season. I'm also interested, while we're on the topic of strikers, I'm also interested in watching Folarin Balogun, who has a lot of competition at Monaco. We've talked about Micah Biereth before, who was on a tear last season. Ariel Mbolo just out here making his countrymen making life miserable for the U.S. earlier this summer. And then Monaco also signed another 24-year-old striker from Bochum earlier this transfer window as well. There are bodies for Folarin Balogun to fight with. And we've never seen, I'm just going to keep up this theme because I do think it colors how I look at some of these U.S. players in the European season. We've never seen Folarin Balogun under Mauricio Pochettino. He has been injured a lot in the last 8-10 months or so, to the point where we have yet to see him actually play at all for Poch. And I want Balogun to be playing in a way that positions him well to at least get a call-up for the U.S. men's national team, because it is no guarantee with Ricardo Pepi in a position we all think to put up some goals this year and to be a really useful player for the U.S. men's national team. Pat Agiman becoming a favorite of Pochettino. The spots are thinner now than I sort of thought they might be coming out of the Gold Cup. I think Balogun on talent is still absolutely a part of this first-choice roster, but it's not quite as etched in stone now as I thought it would be when Balogun first committed to the U.S. or when Pochettino comes in at all. So he's another guy that I think maybe more than either of the other players we've talked about so far, actually certainly more than either of those guys, a good season for Balogun changes a lot of stuff for him.
Yeah, sorry, Joe, I wasn't laughing at your point. I was laughing at the scene of the borrower sneaking into the room behind Ryan there as you were talking.
There's some traffic there. That's all. I apologise.
Ryan brings the pawn servants with him on vacation, so that's what that was.
Who's going to tend to it here, Joe? Come on.
See, the thing is, the Auckland City squad, they know they're not allowed to enter this room at any point while I'm recording. For Balogun, Joe, completely agree. He is still the player that probably has the highest ceiling when you look at the number 9 pool, although Ricardo Pepi sometimes gives me cause to question that. The positive for Balogun is towards the end of last season, Adi Hütter, who is the Monaco head coach, kind of transitioned into this front two system with Balogun as one of those two. The positive there is he obviously there's two positions for him to fill, more opportunity. The negative, of course, there is that's not a role that exists for the national team right now under Pochettino. And also, even with those two spaces, Monaco are stacked in the final third, because if you have those two spots, it's not guaranteed you're going to use two out-and-out strikers. They might use Minamino. They might use Ben Seguir, who is outstanding and showed that in the first half of last season. I think he's going to be the next one off the sort of the Monaco conveyor belt of young players. So yeah, that's a tough squad for Balogun to break into and become like a guaranteed starter for them this season.
Graham, let's have a chat about Johnny Cardoso, shall we? The dream move to Atleti, of course, he's got. But are we going to be watching him this season on the field or sitting down with a jacket on with some chewing gum in his mouth?
I think he's going to play. I think he's going to play at least initially. Now, I say initially, he's currently struggling with an injury, recovering from an injury that, of course, largely kept him out of the Gold Cup for the US. I think we would have seen a lot more of Johnny Cardoso during the summer had it not been for that injury. And it is a big season for Johnny. He is now at one of the biggest clubs in the world, and we covered on Monday's episode how Atleti have rebuilt this summer. And Johnny, it seems, is going to be a big part of that rebuild because he has been signed to be the anchor at the base of the midfield, which is obviously where he played for Real Betis. He had a strong season for Betis last season. I remember one game in particular against Real Madrid. He was absolutely outstanding and reached a level that I frankly wasn't aware that he could reach. I remember in that game he was even comfortable in the ball. He didn't give the ball away on the edge of his own box, as he tends to do for the US when he plays. But the role he played for Betis was as a destroyer, and he had the likes of Isco and Antony to do the progressive stuff ahead of him. The hope is that he'll have the same creativity ahead of him at Atleti, especially with Thiago Almada coming in, Alex Baena coming in as well. And I think what will be interesting is if Johnny does become a key player for Atleti this season, How does that affect his USMNT standing? Could we see Tyler Adams and Johnny together as a midfield two in games where the US have less control and possession? I think there's a scenario where that could be useful in games where the US are deep and compact and want to play on the break, and Johnny will be getting loads of rep doing that sort of thing for Atleti this season. So yeah, there's a scenario where he is. I read an Opta article a couple of weeks ago. I referenced this in the show, I think last week or maybe on Monday, which called him one of the most significant signings Atleti have made in years. They've needed a player like this for a long time. Keep in mind the quintessential Simeone teams always have a Gabby or a Koke at the base of the midfield. Of course, Koke is still hanging around but doesn't have the same level of physicality. So the idea is he is going to be I just need to see it first before
it's a great idea.
Truly believe that it's happening.
It's a great concept. Yeah, I mean, it's so funny. We talk about this with Cardoso a lot. He's the player that often makes me doubt my own ability to do this job, I guess. It's like the simplest way to say it. Where I watch him and I just don't see it, and then Atletico Madrid pay, what was it, $35 million for him, something along those lines.
Yeah.
I know I just did the financial thing with PSV. Atleti are not in the business of paying that money and not expecting that guy to play real minutes for them. They're not in a position where they can drop that kind of cash just on nobody, right? So I do think we're going to see Cardoso play this year, and I am genuinely really excited to see what he looks like, because that's a big move to a big club for a player that I just still don't quite rate. And obviously Atleti know, and the people there know more about soccer, will forget more about soccer than I'll ever know. But man, it's just wild to me. I kind of need to pinch myself to actually believe it, but I'm excited to see how it looks.
Wonderful stuff. How about Malik Tillman? Obviously, he's got a new life at Bayer Leverkusen. The Bully News telling me that Malik Tillman was watching the 3-0 friendly win over Pisa earlier this week from the bench. Minor stress reaction from training, and he's not going to feature, Graham, in Friday's friendly against Chelsea.
Is that stress reaction? I've been signed to replace Florian Wirtz.
Something like that. Yeah, it doesn't specify, but one can assume so. Yes, Graham. But how's that going to go? That whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, everything that's happened to Tillman this summer has given them the big build-up, right? He is now one of the most expensive American players ever, and as I just referenced, he is the direct replacement for Florian Wirtz at Leverkusen. It's a real sink-or-swim season for him, because there is a lot of pressure on him to now make the next step. And going back through the last few seasons, back to when I personally became aware of Malik Tillman, which is when he was playing at Rangers, he has progressed. He's now, to my eye anyway, he's a very different player to the one that I thought I was watching at Rangers at the time. Maybe Rangers were just not using him in the correct way. But there has been that progression season to season from Malik Tillman. So there is reason to believe, there's optimism, that he can now make that step up for Leverkusen. And I did watch a little bit of that game that you were talking about, Ryan, against Pisa, which was yesterday. Largely for the tactical framework. That was the most interesting thing to me. And look, it's a pre-season game. Once Tillman's back, once signings have been made, because I think Leverkusen are going to be active in the last 2 or 3 weeks of the window. I read that they're interested in Raheem Sterling, so we'll see if they bring someone else in. So this framework could shift, but it very much seemed like Ten Hag has kept a lot of the framework from Xabi Alonso. So it was wing backs, it was two narrow attackers behind the centre forwards, but they then have the freedom to drift and link up and get forward into the box. And Tillman will be one of those attackers. That was the Florian Wirtz role, and I don't see that role changing unless Leverkusen, as I mentioned, bring in a winger, which would maybe allow them to go to a 4-2-3-1. In that scenario, Tillman's he could play all the way across. I was going to say he'll be the number 10. To be honest, he could play in one of the wider positions as well and cut inside. Or if they go to a front three, maybe his role is in more of like a central midfield role, like an advanced central midfield role. So he's got the versatility that no matter which way Ten Hag remoulds that team, I anticipate he's going to get a lot of minutes, and yeah, I'm really excited to see how he gets on.
Yeah, Joe, excited to see the partnership of Tillman and Ten Hag.
Yeah, I mean TNT, just iconic. I do want to see progression from Malik Tillman. I think that's exactly what everybody in USMNT circles probably wants to see. He's a player that can do stuff that nobody outside of Gio Reyna in this pool can do, and Gio Reyna is not in a position to do those things. So a lot of that then falls to Malik Tillman, and I don't think he had a great Gold Cup, frankly. I don't think he was productive for the U.S. in a lot of big moments, and I think he was actively poor through a lot of the final. but you can see his ability on the ball. Like, you can see his comfort and his strength and his press resistance and his vision, his desire to combine. Like, he checks a lot of boxes of what I think the U.S. need in central midfield at entering a World Cup where they're going to have to be the protagonist in more games because of how this World Cup is structured with them as a pot one team. So Malik Tillman having a good season is huge for the U.S. because it shows that he can develop the consistency to do it against better teams, first of all, and against and on an actually regular and consistent basis. That's necessary. And that, I think, is what's lacking from Malik Tillman right now, is that consistency of effort. Less so maybe now. I think he has improved in his work rate, but his actual consistency on the ball and his ability to maximize his touches, that's going to have to be an important part of this season for him in the Bundesliga at the highest level that he will have ever consistently played at. Yeah, Tillman is on my short list as well of players that not just I'm interested in watching, but that I think have the biggest ability to impact the success or lack thereof of the U.S. at the World Cup.
Good stuff. Joe, any other players you want to quickly flag before we head into our break?
Nope, no other players. That's it. Those are the only ones.
Good. Excellent. Consider them watched for this season upcoming. We'll take a quick break. When we come back, Transfer Talk. Join us then. Total Soccer Show, welcome back to USMNT Weekly. Let's take a look at some of the transfer activity among major Americans out there in the game right now. Matt Turner, who's having a revolution. He's gone to New England on loan. Good stuff, yeah?
It's good stuff in that he's out of Lyon and he's out of that mess, and this loan deal happened a lot quicker than I feared when we last spoke about Turner's situation only last week, because it all seemed rather messy, and my fear was that it was going to get dragged through a court, or at least passed across the front of a team of lawyers, and it was going to drag on until the end of the window. And the longer it went in the window, it seems like goalkeeper's the worst position for you to have uncertainty in a transfer window, because teams are obviously signing up goalkeepers pretty early, at least if you're a well-run team. And so that was the scenario I feared for Matt Turner. And so it's definitely a positive that he's found a landing spot where he is going to be first choice and he's going to pick up minutes, because obviously it's a huge season for Matt Turner before the World Cup. He has potentially lost his place, or at least it looks like he's lost his place in the national team lineup coming out of the Gold Cup, where Matt Friis, it seems to be Poch's first choice. And he has basically taken 2 seasons out of his career on the bench at Nottingham Forest and Crystal Palace, which that latter move in particular was absolutely baffling. It just never made any sense. It didn't make sense at the time, and it certainly doesn't make any sense in retrospect. So Turner just needs to play. And we have seen with Friis and some other players that Poch doesn't seem so concerned about where you're playing, just as long as you're playing, and he has opened the door for the MLS contingent into the squad. Having said that, the way I'd frame this is Turner has lost his advantage over Friis, because if he was playing first-team football in Europe in a Big Five league, that's naturally going to give him, or you would think it would give him an advantage over, like, not just Friis, but Zach Steffen as well, or any other goalkeeper playing in MLS, and he doesn't have that anymore. But nonetheless, it will be good to see him playing again, and it's an environment he'll be comfortable in, and possibly more for any other for a goalkeeper over any other position. I think that comfortability maybe matters. So I'm looking forward to seeing him.
On the Crystal Palace front, Graham, I was listening to Soccerwise the other day, and Tom was talking about this move from Lyon to New England for Matt Turner, and mentioned that Crystal Palace move, which I think we all agreed didn't really make sense. He wasn't going to get real minutes. Apparently, and folks can go listen to that episode, it was a recent one, to get the full context, but apparently the reporting is that Lyon, that Forest were so difficult that window and had rejected a number of other moves that Turner wanted to make that would have given him a chance to actually play and be a starter somewhere, I think on the continent, and they wanted to sell and were so prickly about all that when they realized they couldn't, the options were low for Matt Turner. So he's been, I bring that up to say, he's been in transfer hell, really, like the last couple of summers now. And this, I think, is exactly what Matt Turner needs. Like for Matt Turner specifically, this is a great move. Going back to a place where you're a little bit more comfortable, going back to a place where you had the best years of your entire career, where you really launched your career, where you were an MVP level player, but goalkeepers don't win MVP, so we can't do that. Where you have had a consistent impact, it's fantastic for him, because he needs to capitalize, and I think he wants to capitalize on this window of opportunity to make an impact at a home World Cup. So if you're Matt Turner, not only does this sort of temporarily get you out of the weird European mess that you've been in, that maybe would have been a good idea regardless of whether there was a World Cup coming up in less than a year's time, But it also, because we can't ignore the fact that there is that World Cup coming up, it also puts you in a position to fight for your spot that you maybe just weren't going to have. Now, I will say, I think I talked about on this show, I liked the Lyon move in theory, right? Before everything came out and went to crap, basically for them. I liked that concept. I think Matt Turner is a starting level goalkeeper at a much higher level club than New England. But he's just not in a position to be choosy right now and hasn't really been in that position for quite some time because of how really his European adventure has been a European misadventure. So he needs a chance to reset for his own career. And I think going to a place where you've had so much of that success in the past, and he's going to walk in, he's the starter from day one, right? There's no doubt about that. New England made him a DP for the rest of this season, even if it is just sort of an accounting mechanism thing. They want to keep him around for longer term, you'd have to imagine, New England. So I think this is a really, really good move for Turner. He's going to have all the opportunities he wants between now and the start of the World Cup next summer. We will see what he does with those opportunities.
Excellent stuff. Graham, in a move that may be completed by the time this podcast hits dear listeners' ears, Tim Weah being linked with Marseille. We're seeing reporting of him taking a medical, basically, as we record. So could be, and may well already be, another one of his father's former clubs. Another one of his father's French former clubs, I suppose, as well. So Tim Weah to Marseille, what do we think?
Yeah, so Fabrizio Romano gave this deal the here we go treatment on Tuesday. I saw pictures of Weah arriving at Marseille airport last night, so either he is in town for a medical or he's just decided to have a conveniently timed holiday on the south coast of France. And apparently it's a loan, initially a loan with an obligation to buy next year for €14 million, €3 million in add-ons, and a €1 million loan fee. So it's a deal that's potentially worth €18 million, €15 million if you take away the add-ons, which is closer to what Marseille wanted than what Juve were holding out for last week. They will look at it as if the add-ons are achieved, they've got basically what they wanted. So I think this is a scenario where everyone is happy with this arrangement. And Tim Weah looked very happy as he was making his way through the mob of people outside Marseille airport. And that's kind of what I was talking about with Marseille being a special club that I compare to a club like Napoli. If you do well there, you're an icon. There's shrines to you in the street if you do well as a Marseille player. So yeah, I like this move for Weah, partly for that reason, but also just because he's going to be a key figure, or more of a key figure than he ever was at Juve. I think De Zerbi's fast approach will suit him. There's a spot on the right side for Weah to fit into after Luis Enrique went to Inter Milan earlier in the window. And even if De Zerbi shifts that system, he used a back three with wing-backs for a lot of last season, but there was also a time towards the end of the campaign when he went to a 4-3-3. I think there's scope for Tim Weah to fit into that system as well, because obviously on that right wing spot it doesn't really change in terms of his role. And Marseille as a club they seem to be on an upward trajectory. They're going to be in the Champions League this season, which is a platform he wouldn't have had at Juve if he had stayed there this season, of course. And I even read a L'Equipe article on how Weah could be even used through the middle with Aubameyang on the left, Greenwood on the right. They've brought in Igor Paxiao from Feyenoord, who I think is a cracking player, and kind of surprised that he's gone to Marseille and maybe not like a Premier League team. So yeah, I think this is a good move for Timothy Weah, and I think he'll be useful for them.
I love the rumblings of Tim Weah in the middle. I have long-lasting, and I haven't sold all my shares, I have long-lasting Tim Weah through the middle stock, back from when he was in the early stages of his career for PSG. A little bit for Celtic, if memory serves. He played centrally. He's just... I know this maybe sounds cringy coming from me. He's like a baller. Like he wants to combine and move off the ball and can stretch the line. And he's a player that I think, outside of maybe center back, because I don't think his build would translate there terribly well, I think he could legitimately play so many different positions all the way across the field, and we've seen that throughout his career. We've seen him at both fullback spots. We've seen him on the wings at wing back. We've seen him more centrally in the attack. I think there is a world, we're not living in this world, but I think there is a world in which Tim Weah gets turned into like a Thomas Muller-esque, floating 10 half-space attacker, occasional striker in a really good team. We're not quite there, but I do think this transfer, I think the Turner transfer is a solid A. I think this transfer, if I'm grading it, is also a solid A. There's just a lot to like about this. Like, the biggest risk, I think, in all this is that Roberto De Zerbi is a bit chaotic personality-wise.
Yeah,
and maybe something gets blown up. But as long as that doesn't happen, guys, and of course there's we would have no precedent for that sort of thing happening. As long as that doesn't happen, I think this is a strong A.
Yeah, I saw a video a couple of days ago. I think this was from last season, where Ismail Kone and Roberto De Zerbi ended up going at it on the training pitch together, and De Zerbi basically telling them there and then to find thanks for that clarification. Yeah. Basically telling them there and then to find a new club. So De Zerbi can be volatile, and I think that's part of his appeal, De Zerbi. And I don't know what it is.
Super appealing. I mean, come on.
Oh, I don't know. Like, the fire is appealing. Like, not the Chicago fire, although getting more appealing these days. But like the spark is what makes Roberto De Zerbi. It's also the thing that has kept him at clubs like Marseille and not at like Man City or wherever. But yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing how that union works for Weah.
That'd be great. On a personal note, by the way, the Stade Velodrome, Marseille Stadium, is always been on my bucket list. It looks so cool. Like, it's memories of France '98 when it didn't used to have the roof as well. This sort of semicircular stands at either end. Bergkamp scoring against Argentina there. Oh,
it's on my list. I've been to Marseille. Marseille's a great city. And I think this is where the comparison with Napoli that I continue to make comes from. When you're in Marseille, they are omnipresent everywhere. The team, it feels like the team is the city. Unfortunately, it was in the summer, so there wasn't a game on at the Velodrome, but I'm totally with you there, Ryan. It's one of the few examples of a modernised stadium that I think has been improved. Like, that roof just adds to the sort of aura that stadium has. So I'll go one day.
I remember one of my friends saying, why do they play in a cycling venue? Velodrome.
Why is it called
cycling? I don't. Maybe it used to be a velodrome. That's what I'm guessing. Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
We should do some research on that. Why don't we talk about Max Arfsten, who is probably not on his way from Columbus, Ohio, to the northeast of England?
Still handsome though.
Still handsome. If Max Arfsten went to play for Rob Edwards, would that be too much handsome in one building?
Oh man, I hadn't considered that. Whew. Yeah. Might have to become a Middlesbrough fan. So there's been a good bit of speculation around Max Arfsten this summer. Toulouse were reportedly interested a couple of weeks ago. Apparently they made an offer of around €2 million for Arfsten, and that bid was rejected. More recently, Middlesbrough have come in, and they apparently reportedly made a bid of around $3 million to Columbus literally just before we started recording. Tom Bogart reporting that offer has been rejected. So this deal might not be happening. I think we obviously don't have any kind of like follow-up details. We've just read that tweet from Tom. I don't know if the idea is Middlesbrough are gonna come back in for Arfsten. I'm unsure whether that would be a great fit for him. I think if that had been 12 months ago, I would have felt better about this move, because back then Michael Carrick was in charge and he played a very possession-heavy game. But there were some positives. I think that team was on an upward trajectory, but it just seemed to be, their progress seemed to be so slow last season. They finished about mid-table, despite the fact they were playing good soccer, and Carrick left at the end of last season. He's been replaced by the aforementioned most handsome manager in the world, Rob Edwards, who of course was at Luton in the Premier League. My impression of Rob Edwards is, and look, I didn't watch a huge amount of Luton in the Championship, but my impression of him is that he wants like an aggressive counter-pressing approach. And obviously there's some overlap there with how Boro played under Carrick. But in possession, I think Edwards is much more direct. I don't know if that's a good thing for Arfsten. Like, it might not totally be a bad thing, because obviously there are direct elements about like Nancy ball and how Columbus play. But I just think Edwards is a little bit more of a proper football man than Wilfred Nancy. He's a very handsome, proper football man, but I think Boro are going to be a lot less possession orientated this season and maybe a bit more direct.
Yeah. Joe, does the prospect of another USMNT star heading to the Champo excite you?
In this case, actually, weirdly, yes. I know I've said that it's not always a go-to for me, but I will say for Arfsten, he's a player that I think would benefit from having the soft spots in his game kind of battered a bit. And we could see him really improve defensively in a 1v1 sense. I just want to see Max Arfsten from a USMNT perspective. I would be very curious to see him play in a system that is not a Wilfred Nancy system. Like, we don't have evidence of Max Arfsten as a senior MLS player playing for a manager other than Wilfred Nancy. And we have good evidence for Wilfred Nancy that he turns non-gold things into gold, right? So I think Max Arfsten is a very talented player, and we've seen glimpses of that with the U.S. men's national team. But he is in an ideal role, in an ideal club, under an ideal coach. And that does not last forever. And the U.S. don't have that, right? They don't have the same advantages relative to their competition that the Crew have relative to theirs. So I even if it's not Boro, and it sounds like it won't be, at least for now, even if it's not Boro, I would be very curious to see Arfsten at a team where he is stretched and challenged in a way, in just different ways than he has stretched and challenged in Columbus, I think that could be useful for his game, or it could just derail an entire season or career. So you never know. These are risky things, but I would be curious to see Arfsten in a different environment sometime.
The other thing about this this Boro move, which may or may not be happening now, is for Boro, 3 million. Oh, they're not going to get him for 3 million. But even if that bidding was to get up to 5 and 6 million, that's nothing for them. And so there's no guarantee that he would be going into that team to be a starter. And in fact, Neto Borges is like seen as the starting left back or natural kind of like left wing back if Rob Edwards is going to use that system, which he did at Luton. So maybe that's why they're looking at Arfsten. But I think it's a possibility they'd be looking at him as a depth piece rather than a starting figure, which is maybe not what Arfsten needs at this point of his career.
All right, we shall see on that one. Let's take one more quick break. When we come back, we're going to answer a few of your USMNT-themed questions. Join us then. Total Soccer Show, welcome back to USMNT Weekly. Got a couple of listener questions we're going to put your way now, dear listener. This one from Christian C, who exclaims, it's prediction time. Christian Pulisic will not be in the September USMNT camp. However, it will not be Poch's choice. And Christian has a related follow-up question. If Pulisic or any other major starter who missed the Gold Cup also misses out on this next camp for any reason, does that jeopardise their spot for next summer? I suppose, Joe, it depends largely on what that reason might be, whether it's injury or not, or how serious that injury may be. But there's something to this, isn't there?
Yeah, a little bit, right? And maybe that's something is that Pochettino still seems a bit unpredictable as far as at least my read on Pochettino and his call-ups are concerned. I will say, I like the hot take that Pulisic won't be in the September camp. I disagree with that take, although it is not impossible in a way that it would have felt impossible a few months ago. But never say never, but I do disagree with that. Time is running thin, right? So missing camps could very well hurt some of these guys under Pochettino. Or this is the other side of the coin, Poch could think that there's a big enough gap in talent from, let's think about guys who are not at the Gold Cup this summer for various reasons, right? Jedi, who is absent for light injury kind of stuff. McKennie, Weah, Club World Cup, Dest, another injury fitness situation. Whoever else, right? Whoever else you want to think of from that Gold Cup. Poch could think that there's a big enough gap from those guys to the Gold Cup guys that it's still worth sticking with players that haven't been around as much, and maybe some guys who could theoretically miss September. Although I think it should be a much more complete U.S. group at that stage. He could think, the talent is just there with these first choice guys, and we just did a whole Gold Cup with these other guys, and I know that they have real limitations. We just don't know what Poch is going to do. Like, we don't have the evidence. Anything seems on the table. I would lean towards Pochettino, using the 11 next summer at the World Cup that we all think is the best 11. And even if that is a couple players being gone in September, a couple guys being gone in October for various reasons, right? Whatever it is, I think Pochettino will ultimately go back to the group that we think is still probably the U.S.'s best group, where it's whoever in goal. Richards is one of the center backs. You've got Dest and Jedi Robinson. You've got Adams and McKennie at the very least in midfield. You've got Pulisic and Weah, and you've got Pepi or Balogun up top. Like that not happening would surprise me. But is it 100% that that's going to happen? No, and especially not under Pochettino. So it's an interesting thing to think about, especially coming after this summer where there were so many absences. But I suspect, even if I'm not 100% there, I suspect that we will see Pochettino go back to the well that I think most coaches would go back to when it comes to the talent in this team.
And that's why the September window is going to be so telling. Because until now, Poch has, for one reason or another, had his hand forced with the players that he can pick. Theoretically, in September, he's going to have free pick of those players again, assuming that he's got a fit enough squad. And so we are going to learn a lot more about just where his head is at. And so I'd feel better placed answering this question after that window. I mean, I do accept, I'm not entirely sure about it not being Pochettino's choice thing. Is that an injury reference, or is that some sort of reference to Pulisic like falling out with Poch? And I don't know what that is kind of referencing exactly.
That feels to me like Pulisic not wanting to take these camps too seriously, maybe not attending out of personal choice. Or there was a period, Graham, a man we don't mention too much anymore, Ryan Giggs, where for Wales, Sir Alex Ferguson would write him a sick note for like every single window. Yeah. And he only showed up for sort of, well, they didn't really go to major tournaments, but, he showed up for the big games. There could be a scenario where Pulisic tries to fit that kind of mould, arguably.
I mean, if that were to happen, if that were to materialise, I would possibly start to jump on the bandwagon of there is a problem with Christian Pulisic in this squad. Like, that is not ideal whatsoever. I think there was a reasonable enough argument for him to skip the Gold Cup, and yes, he's played so much soccer over the last couple of years. If he's not in that camp in September and it's him that's asking for that time off, yeah, I think there probably is a problem. I don't think that's likely. I think there is a non-zero chance that it's Poch maybe not selecting. I think it's a slim chance, I should clarify that, but there's a non-zero chance that it's Poch leaving Pulisic out to send a message. But even if that were to happen, I would predict Pulisic gets back into the squad, because I just think Poch would be doing that to jolt him into life ahead of the World Cup. I think it would be with a view to having him back in the squad for the World Cup. And if he wants to send a message, there are less talented players with lower stakes that he can do that with. Like Joe Scally is right there, who's already seems to have left him out of a squad to send a message. I mean, Gio Reyna, I don't know whether this would send a message either, but I saw Doug McIntyre saying pretty categorically on a podcast, it may have been Alexi's podcast, that he just doesn't see a scenario where Reyna's going to be in that World Cup squad. Now, obviously, he has contacts that I don't. I have to imagine there's a scenario where Reyna goes to Parma, does well, makes the squad. But Doug was saying that even in that scenario, like, Poch has kind of made his mind up with Gio Reyna. So there are other players that I feel like he could set a message, set a tone, without ostracising clearly your most impactful attacking piece at this point.
Yeah, maybe like the next guy we're going to talk about. Although I won't toss water on that powder just yet. My other point that I was thinking about when I was thinking through and trying to imagine what I would say in response to this question is that I think it would be great for the U.S. to be in a spot where missing a camp really hurt you. I'm just not sure the U.S. is really there at the moment, frankly, when it comes to the player pool. The gap between Getty and Max Arfsten seems really big to me. I to the point where I don't really believe that there's any world in which Getty Robinson could miss all of the next camps and come back in the pre-World Cup camp. And I would still feel like Getty Robinson should be starting every game of the World Cup for the U.S. Between Richards and the rest of the center back option feels like a big gap. Dest, we did that already on the show. McKennie and the rest of the eights. Pulisic and Weah and the wingers. Like, the gaps are still really big. And that is one of the biggest disappointments for the U.S. Bigger for me than the Copa America disappointment. Bigger for me than the Nations League disappointment. The biggest disappointment for the U.S. from the last World Cup to the one that we're knocking on the door of now is that next group of players hasn't developed. Like, who is that player? It's Malik Tillman. That's like the one guy, really, that I think we would say, okay, he's taken a step forward and is probably starting for the U.S. I mean, Diego Luna as like a depth option for the U.S. maybe as well. There have been a couple of players. But by and large, it has been a lot of, it's hard for me to imagine not just going back to the same guys. Instead of, oh, wow, this player has developed. Jack McGlynn has really turned a corner and has moved to Europe and is playing really well in the Europa League. That hasn't happened. Of Johnny Cardoso going and being a dominant presence for the U.S., that hasn't happened. Like, almost none of those things, not none, but almost none, have actually happened. And I think the U.S., as a result of their lack of next group of players coming through to step into the team and to challenge, because that hasn't happened, it's just harder for me to imagine. Still not impossible, like we said, but harder for me to imagine that missing camps really is going to drastically hurt some of these players. And I bet deep down some of those guys know that too.
Yeah. Christian C., thank you very much indeed for your question. One more here from Andrew McPherson, who says, I was listening to Not the Top 20 podcast, which is a podcast all about the EFL, and their standings predictions episode. When talking about Norwich, one of the hosts said that he believes Josh Sargent is the best striker in the Championship. Is that even close to the truth? And why has he not been given more opportunities for the US or bigger clubs, if so? Graham, first off, Not the Top 20 podcast. Big fans of George and Ali here. Very good stuff. Are we of the belief that assertion that Josh Sargent is the best striker in the Championship is close to the truth?
He might well be the best centre-forwards in the Champo right now. What I would say, though, is doesn't seem to be a huge amount of attacking quality in that division at the moment. So I think João Piro would be the other one that you would look at, but he isn't even in the Championship anymore. He's got promoted with Leeds last season, scored 19 goals. I think he maybe has more of a obvious physical presence than Josh Sargent. That's not to say that Josh Sargent has zero physical presence, but I think Piro is quite a physical centre-forward. Other than that, I was looking through the top scoring centre-forwards from last season. Tommy Conway, who doesn't get anywhere near the Scotland starting lineup. Emil Rees, Callum Robinson, it seems like it's slim pickings for centre forwards, at least at a high level, at championship level in the EFL. So that may well be true. I don't know if that automatically parlays Sargent into being a strong pick for the US. And he's a confusing player for me, Sargent. Always has been, because on a lot of levels, I do think he is, if you break him down in terms of his qualities, I think he is up there as one of the US's best centre forwards. I like his movement. I think he combines better than a lot of the other options. He has scored at least 15 goals or league goals in the last 2 seasons in the championship. And to address the part of Andrew's question about not being or not getting chances for bigger clubs, it has felt like that chance might come this summer. Premier League clubs are being linked. Wolfsburg were close to getting a deal done. Norwich apparently want £20 million for him. So that says something about how high his stock is at the moment. Where I have an issue with Sargent is, and Joe, I know that you've often been kind of like card carrying member of the Josh Sargent club to a relative degree on this show. So correct me if I'm wrong on this. I think you'll have a better read on him than I will. But when I've watched Josh Sargent, at least at a high level in the Premier League and for the US, I think he has struggled in isolation, which then leads to him basically being a non-factor in game. And I think that's possibly why he has struggled in the Premier League, because he's playing for teams that don't get up the pitch for prolonged periods. He's having to play in open space a lot of the time. And for the US as well, that seems to be the scenario. And there's something in that about why Pat Agyman has done something for the national team where he is better. He might not be a better player, he might not be a better goal scorer, but he is maybe better in those open space moments where he can use his physicality, get his body and behind the ball and get the US up the pitch. And so that's where I see Josh Sargent is lacking. And as long as he is lacking, the reality of the situation for the US is they kind of need a player who can do those things, and he might not be that player.
Yeah, it's hard for the US. Being a striker in general is difficult for the US men's national team. I'll start there on Josh Sargent. I think it is not surprising to me that he hasn't had a ton of looks for the US because, number one, he hasn't scored for the U.S. since 2019. And that is a reductive way to look at it because there aren't a lot of international games in the first place. And scoring goals is hard and streaky, and the sample size is small even over that period of time. But he hasn't been especially good for the national team. I think about his minutes against Panama back in March, right, in the Nations League, and how much he struggled in that game, and about how he wasn't called up over the summer as part of that group of players that Pochettino was very much sending a message to. I think Sargent has some blame on his own to bear for his lack of production and opportunity with the U.S. But I do think, as someone who likes Josh Sargent's game for the reasons that you outlined, Graham, it is not all on Sargent for the U.S. as to why he hasn't had more looks. Being a striker for the U.S. is just really hard. They don't create a lot of chances because they don't have elite talent in the attack. And so you do need, if you're a striker, some degree of help to get on the score sheet on a regular basis. And the U.S. don't do a great job of helping their nines, right? And that was true when Josh Sargent had his stint in the Premier League. They were not a good team. So having real opportunities doesn't come often, those opportunities. So that's part of this on the U.S. side. On the club side, the weirdest thing about Josh Sargent, I think, of recent history, actually, is how this whole Wolfsburg move came down, or rather didn't come down. Where the reporting after all this, sort of the dust had settled, was that, yeah, maybe there's a little haggling on the fee between Norwich and Wolfsburg in the Bundesliga, but that Sargent really didn't seem keen on the move at the end of the day, where he would have had an opportunity to go and really play a big role at that sort of outlay for a club like Wolfsburg. And that just doesn't make sense to me. At the end of the day, that doesn't make sense to me. The fact that Josh Sargent doesn't leap at that opportunity for his career, right? I mean, I'll be the first to say there are many things more important than soccer, so I'm not trying to just toast the guy for that. But in the context of this question and of his status with the U.S. and his status as a striker in the global game, that's the kind of move that is like an opportunity that's almost too good to pass up, unless there is something big that we don't know about the sporting side of this. And that's all I'm talking about. There are other things that are more important, that matter more, et cetera, et cetera. That seems odd to me, that Josh Sargent was seemingly willing to come to FC Cincinnati last summer. Doesn't scream, this guy is trying to push himself to his absolute limits as a soccer player and get as good as he can. So I think maybe there's some other stuff going on with Josh Sargent. And again, I'm not trying to speak out of turn here. I probably have spoken a little too much out of turn. But yeah, there's some weirdness. And at the end of the day, his talent level is not so high that he is needs to be getting minutes for the U.S. Graham. I think you laid that out well. He's the best. He's one of the best of the bunch, and the bunch in the Champo is not the best bunch of grapes that you could have.
Yeah, the thing that I read, I can't think where I read this, so I apologise. I wish I could cite an outlet. But the thing that I read when we spoke about this, was it last week or the week before, was that he's determined to have another crack at the Premier League. He feels like previously he was used out of position, he was used in a role that didn't suit him, and so that's his guiding light, is finding a Premier League team to have another crack at the best league in the world, which I could kind of understand. There's speculation there's been links with Leeds, Burnley. I don't think that one's off the table. Leeds seem to have moved on a little bit from earlier in the window to other targets. The Burnley chat swirls around every so often, so maybe he's got some sort of inside information, or his agent has had a steer that Burnley are going to come back in for him at the end of the window, and he just prefers that because it's another crack at the Premier League. That's the only thing I can think of, because I agree, Joe, it's a little bit baffling how that
got to jump at an opportunity to do the same thing he did with Norwich last time that went so well. Like, I mean, when you have that opportunity, how could you not just lunge at it with both hands?
Bringing some data to the table for Josh Sargent being the best striker in the Championship, I have pulled up. Well, it's betting data, so take with that what you will. It is the top scorer market for the Championship this season. Josh Sargent is the 9th favourite. Josh Sargent is not the favourite US forward to be top scorer in the Championship. Had you right?
Had you right? Wow, okay, yeah, that actually makes sense.
He's 7th favourite. Cameron Archer, obviously got a decent amount of minutes with Southampton in the Premier League. Jay Stansfield at Birmingham, and George Hurst are the favourites. George Hurst is Ipswich, isn't he? So those are the 3 favourites. There's a good list here.
There's always a Scot in there in the Champo. We're prolific at producing good scoring forwards in the Championship level that make no impact on the national team, which feels like the USA's thing as well, actually. We've got a commonality there.
And in case you're interested, Josh Sargent is 17-1 to be the Championship top scorer. Damien Downs, 25-1. And who else have we got? We've got others who are...
Damien Downs, I'd forgotten about that one.
No, I can't find the others. Daryl DK's 40-1. There we go. Yeah. Long shot.
So had you right of that bunch?
40-1 to play, or 40-1
to be top scorer? Or either or, I suppose. We shall see. Anyway, Andrew McPherson, thank you very much indeed for your question, and thank you to everybody who submitted a question to USMNT Weekly. We'll be back on the feed with this episode next week, but for now, Gerald Lowry, thank you very much for your expertise as always, sir.
Thank you, Ryan. This was fun.
It was indeed. Graham Ruthven, thank you very much, sir.
Thanks, Ryan Bailey.
And listener, thank you to Moses for joining us on this one. We'll be back on the feed very shortly, but for now, bye!